It's not up to the Senate to make the House's case for impeaching President Donald Trump. Hello, this is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government, dailytorch.com. Hit that subscribe button. Today, we're going to be talking about the Democrats in the House, their quest to impeach President Donald Trump and have him removed from office, and how the Democrats have really not done their homework. They're rushing through this process. And their articles of impeachment, I think, is kind of center stage on that, because they didn't even cite any crimes that the president has been accused of committing for impeachment and removal. Like, we have abuse of power, we have obstruction of Congress, which is and what we're going to talk about today, this obstruction of Congress charge. Neither, by the way, abuse of power, obstruction of Congress, neither of these are crimes under the federal criminal code or any state criminal code. It's just a political case for impeachment by Democrats. And in this case, I mean, if you're not going to cite any crimes, well, there's no basis under the Constitution for impeaching and removing President Trump or any president. It says under the Article 2, Section 4, that you have to have treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors, and they have none of those. And so what are we talking about? Why are we wasting the country's time? By my count, 3 years of this Russiagate, Ukrainegate, Spygate nonsense and delusions and fantasies have wasted approximately or more than 1% of this country's history. We're sacrificing an entire presidential term of office to pursue delusions, basically. And now the Democrats, they want the Senate to do what the House has failed to do, which is, frankly, make a persuasive bipartisan case for impeachment. But here we're going to talk about the obstruction of Congress, the most laughable charge in the articles of impeachment. In this case, Democrats are complaining that, oh, well, former National Security Advisor John Bolton, he hasn't testified. Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney, he hasn't testified. And so, Senate, we need the Senate to call these witnesses to testify, because the House was unable to compel their testimony. But here's the thing. Bolton, he was invited to testify. Democrats, but he refused. And then the Democrats didn't even bother to subpoena his testimony. I mean, maybe they don't want national security advisors to be called in the future and have their testimony compelled, and so they don't want to set up a bad precedent. But that's not up to the Senate to rectify. If the House wanted to, they could take Bolton to court. They could subpoena him and then take Bolton to court. His lawyers already said that Bolton will testify if a court compels him to do so. But the Democrats haven't even gone for a subpoena. As for Mulvaney, he was subpoenaed and refused to testify, citing executive privilege. Testify that the candid advice he provides to the president can't be brought out in a committee hearing. Because citing executive privilege. Now, what usually happens in these cases is the Congress, the House, or the Senate, whoever's calling the executive branch official to testify, would go to a federal court and try to compel the testimony. And the Democrats don't appear to have any intention of doing that for Mulvaney. It's unbelievable. I mean, just in a ruling on Don McGahn, the former White House counsel, a federal judge had ruled that he has a duty to show up for these whatever hearings that the Democrats wanted to call him for. Now, I'm sure that'll be appealed, but this ruling stated, quote, White House aides can withhold the kinds of confidential and privileged information that distinguishes them from everybody else. They can do so by asserting an appropriate privilege if needed when legislators ask questions that probe too deeply. So they were saying McGahn, he can be brought in front of a hearing, and then when there's an executive privilege kind of question, like, oh, that goes to the advice I provide to the president, and then he can cite the privilege. And so Democrats, they could have pursued subpoenas of Mulvaney in federal court. They could have subpoenaed John Bolton, and they could have attempted at least to get these officials to appear before a committee hearing, even if they couldn't compel answers to particular questions to prove whatever case they're attempting to make on impeachment. But that's not the court's job to compel the testimony on specific questions. And it's certainly not the Senate's job to now call these witnesses witnesses on behalf of the House when the House couldn't even get them to testify and didn't even pursue its own rights. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, he sent a letter to Mitch McConnell. He's the Senate Majority Leader, Republican out of Kentucky. And what Schumer, the Democrat out of New York, again, Democratic leader in the Senate, quote, I propose, pursuant to our rules, that the Chief Justice, on behalf of the Senate, issue subpoenas for testimony by the following witnesses with direct knowledge of administration decisions regarding the delay in security assistance funds to the government of Ukraine and the request for certain investigations to be announced by the government of Ukraine. He wants Robert Blair, Mick Mulvaney, John Bolton, and Michael Duffy, the Associate Director for National Security Office of Management and Budget. All four of these witnesses were asked to testify in the House impeachment inquiry but did not appear. Now, for his part, Mitch McConnell is really pushing back on the Schumer's supposition here that it's somehow the Senate's job. The headline reads, the Senate's duty is to conduct a trial, not redo House Democrats' homework for them. And I think this is the right message. He noted that Schumer is prejudging what witnesses the House might wish to call, stating, quote, presumably it would be the House prosecutor's job to ask for the witnesses they feel they need to make their case. Why does the Democratic leader here in the Senate want to predetermine the House impeachment manager's witness request for them before the House has even impeached the president? Might he be coordinating on these questions with people outside the Senate? And I think that's a good question. But the larger element here is that it's not up to the Senate to do the House's job for it, McConnell declared, stating, quote, Chairman Schiff and House Democrats actively decided not to go to court and pursue potentially useful witnesses because they didn't want to wait for due process. Indeed, they threatened to impeach the president if they had to go to court at all. That intentional political decision is the reason why the House is poised to send the Senate the thinnest, least thorough presidential impeachment in our nation's history. McConnell continued, quote, by any ordinary legal standard, what House Democrats have assembled appears to be woefully inadequate to prove what they want to allege. So now the Senate Democrat leader would apparently like our chamber to do House Democrats' homework for them. He wants to volunteer the Senate's time and energy on a fishing expedition to see whether his own ideas could make Chairman Schiff's sloppy work more persuasive than Chairman Schiff himself bothered to make it. Here, I think Mitch McConnell's absolutely right here. I'm so glad that he made this statement on the Senate floor. The House has made a mess of its impeachment sham hearings, and they've utterly failed to build a bipartisan consensus that would be necessary for removing President Trump from office. Instead, they've united Republicans around the leader of their party, President Trump, headed into the 2020 election cycle. Trump's poll numbers are going up. Good job. And they've utterly failed to make a public case for impeaching the president, and now the polls have gone south for Democrats. Go figure. In the meantime, McConnell notes that Schumer apparently does not even understand the Senate's role in trying impeachments. I mean, Schumer, he actually misquotes the Constitution of the United States when he says that the Senate has the sole power of impeachment. I don't know what constitutional law class he went to, but it's not the Senate's job to impeach. They try impeachments. The impeachment's in the House, Senator Schumer. Quote, this is McConnell. This misunderstanding about constitutional roles brings me back to something I raised earlier. The Democratic leader's letter to me, by way of the press, literally misquoted the Constitution. Senator Schumer wrote that we should exercise, quote, the Senate's sole power of impeachment under the Constitution with integrity and dignity. He attributed to the Senate, quote, the sole power of impeachment. Well, there's his problem. That's the role the Constitution gives to the House. Article 1, Section 2 states, quote, the House of Representatives shall have the sole power of impeachment. McConnell continued, quote, if my colleague wants to read about our responsibilities here in the Senate, he needs to turn to the next page. Article 1, Section 3 says, quote, the Senate shall have the sole power to try all impeachments. We don't create impeachments, we judge them. The House chose this road. It is their duty to investigate. It is their duty to meet the very high bar for undoing a national election. As Speaker Pelosi herself once said, it is the House's obligation to, quote, build in an ironclad case to act, end quote. If they fail, they fail. It is not the Senate's job to leap into the breach and search desperately for ways to, quote, get to guilty. That would hardly be impartial justice. And so this is exactly right. The Senate's under zero obligation to call the witnesses the House themselves have failed to call or to compel the testimony of. If the House didn't get the job done and when it had full control of the proceedings, that's Speaker Nancy Pelosi's and House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff's fault for rushing through the process. I mean, they could have gone to court. They could have tried to compel the testimony. It might have taken a little bit longer. They might not have gotten it done in time for the end of the year. Apparently, they have some arbitrary schedule for removing President Trump just a few months before the presidential election, where frankly, we're less than a year away from that. Witnesses have contradicted the key allegation that President Trump leveraged military assistance to Ukraine in exchange for investigations into former Vice President Joe Biden and the corrupt natural gas firm Burisma his son worked for. Others have relied on hearsay and presumptions about the motives of the president's policies. President Trump temporarily postponed Ukrainian military assistance while he considered the corruption in the country and the new administration under Ukrainian president. He was just elected, Volodymyr Zelensky, in April, and to see if to see if Ukraine is a reliable national security partner, or if the corruption there is just so rampant and so endemic that it's not worth sending military assistance there for. And oh, by the way, there's national security concerns with getting involved in the civil war in Ukraine. Not even the Obama administration is supposedly so gung-ho going against Russia. They didn't want to send any military weapons to Ukraine to fight against Russia. And probably because they didn't want to get the United States involved in the civil war there, that could turn into a wider regional war involving Europe, Russia, and maybe even the United States. And if the U.S. and Russia go to war over Ukraine, I mean, that would probably be nuclear. So that could be a catastrophe, I think, not just for America or Ukraine or even Russia, but the entire world. It's an existential threat. We should be trying to diffuse the civil war in Ukraine. We should be working with the Ukrainians. Zelensky, try to get to the bottom of any corruption. If Joe Biden's son was working for Burisma and Burisma was under investigation, and then Joe Biden had the prosecutor fired by withholding, loan guarantees, well, that's Joe Biden's fault. That's still a legitimate investigation by Ukraine into Burisma. And if President Trump is bringing that to Zelensky's attention, well, more power to him. We have a mutual legal assistance treaty, and Ukrainians were trying to get information to the United States about potential U.S. laws being violated under money laundering. And the fact is that the energy minister that heads up Burisma under the Yanukovych administration, which was removed in a 2014 coup that the United States supported, well, there's a U.S. law that says any funds that were stolen from the people of Ukraine, from their treasury, that goes to these former ministers and to their companies, there could be a case for removing Hunter Biden's the money he got from Burisma and returning it to the people of Ukraine. There's actually a U.S. statute for that. So there's more than ample legal basis to look at Burisma, to cooperate with Ukraine on legal matters, and to seek their assistance and get into the bottom of the Russiagate hoax that was perpetrated by the Justice Department and intelligence agencies against the American people. There were lies brought before the FISA court that President Trump and his campaign were Russian agents, that they helped the DNC hacks by Russia, that they helped the John Podesta hacks by Russia and got these emails onto WikiLeaks. But Special counsel Robert Mueller, he found no basis for that, no evidence, and now Democrats want to redo it. They just want to get rid of President Trump, and it doesn't matter what the case is. And I'll leave you with the close here. The articles of impeachment we're looking at right now, remarkably, do not even include any allegations that the president has committed a crime. If anything, at this stage, the case ought to be dismissed. When this gets to the Senate, they're going to, the first question everyone should ask is, okay, what crime are we removing President Trump for? And they're going to say, oh, there are no crimes. There's no statute in the federal code that we're accusing Trump of violating. And at that point, if I'm McConnell, I move to dismiss, and Republicans should just be done with this trial, because you can't have a trial without a crime. The fact is, Democrats are in such a hurry to get impeachment over with before the election season in 2020 that they're not even going through the motions. They just want to check the box to satisfy their radical base that just can't get over the 2016 election results. Hillary Clinton lost, Trump won, get over it. There are no crimes, and now they're saying they didn't fight hard enough to get the right witnesses to testify, and now they expect the Republican Senate to make up for their own deficiencies. It's as if they were trying to lose. That's the commentary. This is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government, dailytorch.com. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications, and have a good day.